What's up, sports fans? This is the NCAA College Sports Channel. It is time to give you my official game picks and predictions heading into Week 8 of the 2025 college football season. So we're heading into the second half of the college football season throughout this series. Going back to my game picks and predictions for the last weekend of the first half of the regular season, I went 6-4 overall. So I got 6 out of the 10 games right and then 4 out of the 10 games wrong. And my overall record heading into the second half of this weekend, the first weekend of the second half of the season, is 46-22. So we've had a pretty good track record here. We haven't gone under 500 this year, which is definitely kind of surprising. I didn't go under 500 last year, and I do not plan to do that again. But I've gone like 5-5 sometimes, but that's not really under 500. So going into Week 8, I picked out 10 of the biggest games in my opinion, and I'm going to give you my picks and predictions, my score predictions, even though the score doesn't really matter. I'm really just picking the teams that I think are going to win, the 10 teams that I think are going to win this weekend. So let's jump right into it. We'll go from pretty much like the Friday night games, because we do have a couple of Friday night games on here, and then we'll look at the Saturday games. So starting here with a Friday night game, we got Louisville at Miami. This one is at 7 o'clock Eastern time on ESPN. Miami favored by 13.5 in this one. You got Miami coming off of a bye week, especially after beating Florida State a couple weeks ago. That game is over, so can Miami focus now the rest of the way and, be a pretty dominant team in the ACC? Well, they're taking on a Louisville team that maybe is kind of desperate here. Louisville's coming off a heartbreaking 3-point loss to Virginia last week. I personally don't know how good this Louisville team is. I haven't watched them at all this year. I just don't know what this team is all about. Jeff Brom is a really good coach, though. I mean, he's got this team motivated, I think, going into this game against Miami, a top 5 team. And plus, this game is, on a Friday, so it is tomorrow night, and we know how these weeknight games can get to, teams. But Miami is coming out of a bye week, so they should be prepared for this game. And they've had a couple of weeks off, or actually a week off, I should say. So we'll see what happens here. I think Miami, though, playing at home, that could be the difference. I think Louisville does keep it close for a while, but I think Miami does pull away sometime, maybe in the fourth quarter. And I think it's probably their running game, and then their defense will step up. And I think Miami does prevail. So I think Miami will stay undefeated this week, and they defeat Louisville here 31-17. Like I said, it's close for a while, and then Miami, of course, will pull away sometime in the fourth quarter late, and that's enough for Miami to stay undefeated. Moving on, another Friday night game. It's Nebraska at Minnesota. This one is at 8 o'clock Eastern time on Fox. Nebraska favored by 8.5. I look at this matchup. Nebraska definitely has the talent advantage, but, we've seen Minnesota under P.J. Fleck pull off some big-time wins, big-time upsets as well. I wouldn't really call this an upset if it were to happen, but, they are the underdog. It's an 8.5-point underdog spread there for Minnesota. That's a pretty high number for a Nebraska team that's going on the road. Nebraska coming off back-to-back pretty close games in the Big Ten, coming off a win against Maryland this past weekend. They're ranked in the top 25, and you got to wonder if that's a little bit of pressure for Nebraska going into this game. And, we've seen these, Friday night Big Ten games as well turn into some, defensive battles, and then some of them turn out to be upsets. I think Minnesota is going to want to run the football, waste the clock down, and keep that Nebraska offense off the field for as long as possible. And I think actually that's the difference. I think that's what's going to happen here. I think it's another one of those big wins for P.J. Fleck as the head coach for Minnesota. And Minnesota, I think, wins this game. So I'm going with an upset here. I got Minnesota defeating Nebraska 20-13 on a Friday night. I think one of these Friday night games, one of them will turn out to be upset. I mean, it could be the Louisville game, or it could be this Minnesota-Nebraska game. We'll see what happens. But we move on now to the Saturday games. First off, we got LSU at Vanderbilt. In the SEC, this one will be on ABC at noon Eastern time. Vanderbilt is favored by 2.5 in this one. Both of these teams ranked in the top 20. You got LSU coming off of a win against South Carolina. The offense is still inconsistent. Pretty much it hasn't gotten better, ever since day one. You got to wonder if LSU's offense is going to step up here in the second half of the season, because it's kind of do or die time here for LSU to kind of show us that they could be a dominant team the rest of the way. And then Vanderbilt, this is a pretty good football team coming off a loss to Alabama a couple weeks ago. You got to wonder if that bye week kind of motivate this team going into another, potential, top 10 matchup, or I shouldn't say top 10, top 20 matchup here. And yeah, I think this game will be where Vanderbilt will come out really fired up. I mean, I do expect both defenses to kind of, pretty much dominate this game, but I got to go with Vanderbilt here because I just don't really have that confidence with LSU. Again, their offense is just so inconsistent. And yeah, Garrett Nussmeier is kind of not living up to what I thought he would do. Now, don't get me wrong, LSU has a really good defense. If they can contain Diego Pavia for a very long time, then LSU probably wins this one. But LSU, though, inconsistency on offense, I think that will be definitely a factor going into this game. So I got to go with Vanderbilt here to win this one. And I'm actually going to pick Vanderbilt to win by 7. I know that's not very likely, but I think Vanderbilt wins it 27-20 in this SEC top 20 matchup. Next up, we have Georgia Tech at Duke. This one is also at noon Eastern time on ESPN. By the way, the Blue Devils are favored by half a point. The over and under at 61.5, so they're expecting a lot of points to be scored in this game. Georgia Tech is a team that's undefeated. They're ranked number 12th in the country. Is Georgia Tech that good, or are they just a little bit overrated? I think this is a pretty good Georgia Tech team. I know they've had a pretty easy schedule this year. The last time they played like a really, tough team was probably in the Clemson game, but they played Wake Forest as well. If you go back to that Wake Forest game, they only won that game by 1 point. So, yeah, they've had some ups and downs, with some tough games, but Georgia Tech is a pretty good football team. You got to wonder if they're kind of due for a loss here at some point. Duke is not a bad football team. They're a solid 4-2 team that doesn't really get talked about that much, but I don't know if I see an upset here. I mean, I wouldn't call it an upset because Duke is favored, but I don't know if Duke can pull off actually like a typical upset here because, Georgia Tech is ranked in the top 15. I just trust Georgia Tech a lot more. I trust their coaching staff a lot more as well. And Haynes King is a veteran quarterback. In these kind of big games, he's always willing to step up. So I think he does step up here in another big game. I think him running the football is going to be too much here for Duke to handle. And I think Georgia Tech pulls it out. So I think Georgia Tech wins it in a pretty close game. I'm going 24-21. Georgia Tech still remains undefeated this weekend. Next up, we have Washington at Michigan. This is also at noon Eastern time on Fox, so this is looking like the big noon kickoff. Michigan is favored by 6.5. That's a very high number there for a Michigan team that's coming off a loss to USC. To be fair, I don't think Michigan played that great last weekend. They were just, outmatched in the USC game. USC ran the football all over that defensive line, and you got to wonder what Michigan is going to be like going into next week, or this weekend when they play Washington here on Saturday. Now, Washington is a pretty good football team. Their only loss coming to Ohio State, of course, which obviously they had no chance whatsoever. And we saw them against Rutgers. They have a great quarterback that can run the football at you. If Michigan is not able to contain him, I think Washington definitely wins this game. But I think Michigan will definitely come out fired up for this one. They're back at home. I do expect Michigan to bounce back here. Bryce Underwood, I think, will make some plays down the stretch of this game. But I think it's a low-scoring defensive battle. But Michigan's defense does prevail. They get a huge stop. I think maybe a couple plays really decide this game. And I got to go with Michigan here. It's tough to go against them when they're playing at Ann Arbor. So I got to go with Michigan here. Close game, but I'm going to go with the Wolverines 28-24 to bounce back after last weekend's loss to USC. Next up, Ole Miss at Georgia. This one is at 3:30 Eastern time on ABC. Georgia's favored by 7.5. You got Georgia coming off of a win against Auburn. That was a pretty ugly game for Georgia. Again, another slow start for the Bulldogs. That's what Georgia's been like this year. They've had a lot of slow starts this year, and then when you see them in the second half, or even later in the first half, they always make adjustments. That's how Kirby Smart and the Georgia Bulldogs have been. This is a team that can, make adjustments in a hurry. And then you look at the other side. Ole Miss is ranked number 5th in the AP poll. Is this Ole Miss team a top 5 team? Are they really that good, or are they a little bit overrated? That's obviously a big question mark. Ole Miss did not look great this past weekend against Washington State. They only won that game by 3. You got to wonder if Ole Miss was probably looking ahead to this game to Georgia. And this is also kind of their first road game ever since, I don't know how long it's been since Ole Miss went on the road. I mean, it's kind of been a while. So I think there's definitely a little bit of concern there for Ole Miss. Plus, this is a revenge game for Georgia. Ole Miss beat Georgia last year pretty easily, thanks to their last year's defense, and then offense made some plays here and there. So I think Georgia does come in fired up, but I think it's another one of those slow starts for the Bulldogs. Then they'll make adjustments, and then I think they'll pull away. Probably in the second half, maybe sometime in the fourth quarter. I got to go with Georgia here to get this revenge on Ole Miss, and I think they win it by 10. 31-21, the final score in this top 10 showdown, and I think game day is actually going to be down here for this game. So, yeah, Georgia and Ole Miss, this one should be a good one. All right, next up, Texas Tech at Arizona State. This one is at 4 o'clock Eastern time on Fox. Texas Tech is favored by 9.5, and I know a lot of people are saying that's too high for a Big 12 game, but no, I feel like the spread is definitely an agreement. Texas Tech is a very good football team. This is definitely a top 10 team. You look at their defense all year long, it's been pretty dominant, and then on offense, it's, here and there. That offense, sometimes it does take a while to get going, but then they start to heat up, big time, probably when they get going in the second half, or even sometime later in the ball game. But you look at Arizona State, they're coming off a bad loss to Utah this past weekend. They got blown out of that game 42-10. Now, they didn't have Sam Levitt in that game. You got to wonder if Sam Levitt's going to be playing in this game. If he does, I think they'll have a chance here to pull off the upset, but if he doesn't, I think it could be a long afternoon for Arizona State. And for that reason, I'm going to be making this prediction based off if he doesn't play. I think Texas Tech clearly overall is the better team, and how dominant they've been this year. I got to go with Texas Tech in this one. So I think Texas Tech will remain undefeated. I think it is a closer game for Arizona State compared to last weekend, but I think the Red Raiders will prevail because of their defense, and I think the offense will make, some big-time third-down conversions late in the game, and that'll seal the deal. So I got Texas Tech surviving 21-17 on the road at Arizona State. Next up, Tennessee at Alabama, the third Saturday of October. This one is at 7:30 Eastern Time on ABC. Alabama's favored by 7.5. I look at these two teams, I think they're both dead even. You got two really good defensive teams going at it, and then you got two offenses that are not very explosive, but they've scored a lot of points this year. And you look at the two teams from this past weekend that they played, they're both coming off 3-point wins. Tennessee beat Arkansas 34-31. Alabama beat Missouri on the road 27-24. So you got to wonder which team is going to have momentum heading into this game. I feel like Alabama's definitely had the, more momentum, ever since losing to Florida State. They've been on a 5-game winning streak. They've beaten the likes of Missouri and also Georgia. So, yeah, Alabama's definitely been on a row. Tennessee, though, is not a bad football team. I've been really impressed with Joey Aguilar this season, especially the way that he's handled this offense for, Josh Heupel. And yeah, this has been a back and forth series as of late. It seems like the home team always wins it, and that's what I'm going to go with. I think this is going to be a back and forth game. I think it will be a shootout, honestly. So I think Alabama at home, that's probably the difference here. In the third Saturday of October, it should be another good one. But I got to go with Alabama with the revenge factor, and I think they win it here 31-28. Give me the Crimson Tide here in the third Saturday of October rivalry. Next up, we have USC at Notre Dame, another rivalry game here on NBC. This one is also at 7:30 Eastern Time. Notre Dame is favored by 9.5, and I know people saying that's a high spread there, but you look at Notre Dame, they're playing at home in this one. I get it. It's too much of a high spread for a USC team that's coming off a big win against Michigan this past weekend. And I look at these two teams. I think they're also pretty even. Defensively, I don't know who to give the advantage to in this one. Offensively, I think both offenses are pretty even. They both like to run the football. And you got two quarterbacks that can sling it down the field. So I think both defenses will kind of struggle in this game. If USC can do it they did against, Notre Dame, like they did against Michigan last week, and they can stop the Notre Dame running game, then yeah, USC probably wins this one by at least double digits, but it's a rivalry game. I think it will definitely be close, but Notre Dame's playoff hopes are definitely on the line here because if they lose this game, they're out of the college football playoff, but they win it, I think they'll probably win out and, probably pretty much get in as an at-large team at 10-2, and I think that's the difference here. I think that, motivation from being being, on the playoff rise and then also being playoff elimination factor, I think Notre Dame prevails. I think Notre Dame does prevail here in a shootout. And like I said, these are two really good offensive teams. And then defensively, I don't know who to give the advantage to. It's also pretty even there. But I got to go with the Fighting Irish here in this big-time rivalry game. Notre Dame prevails at home 38-34 in this close matchup. And then finally, we got Utah at BYU, another rivalry game. This one is at 8 o'clock Eastern time on Fox. Utah is favored by 3.5 here. You got Utah coming off a massive performance against Arizona State. Their offense looked really good in that game, and then defense looked really good as well. And then you got BYU that's coming in undefeated, ranked in the top 15, but have they been really tested all year long? That's definitely the question here for BYU. Now, to be fair, they're coming off a pretty close victory against a pretty solid Arizona team, so maybe that kind of did tell us a little bit about BYU, but I still don't really have enough information to know about the Cougars, and I did like what Utah did last weekend to Arizona State. Their offense was just so explosive, and that defense just played really well. Now, I know that they didn't have Sam Levitt in that game. Arizona State did not have Sam Levitt. So is Utah just that good, or are they, just getting better? That's definitely the question. But I feel like, ever since the loss to Texas Tech, Utah's got a little bit of momentum going into this rivalry game. It is a rivalry game. Both teams will come in really fired up for this one. But I got to go with Utah here just because of how, momentum that they are getting into this weekend, and I think they do prevail. I think this is a game where it does come down to the last play. It probably does go into overtime, but maybe it's a game-winning 2-point conversion that Utah does win it. So I think Utah does prevail. Low-scoring defensive battle, but I'm going to go with the Utes here in the Battle of Utah. I got them winning here 21-20 and giving BYU their first loss of the season. So those are all my official game picks and predictions heading into Week 8 of the 2025 college football season. Give me your game picks and predictions for these 10 games down in the comments below. Thank you for watching this video, and stay tuned for more sports content videos on the NCAA College Sports YouTube channel.